Today on With the First Pick, with the Shrine Bowl and Senior Bowl just around the corner, we're busting out our QB rankings for the 2025 NFL Draft. We'll give you draft ranges, pro comps, and best team fits, and we're going 7 deep, Rick. We'll also take a peek at those QBs who decided to return to school for another year. Was it the right move? We'll answer some mailbag questions from you guys later in the show. I'm Ryan Wilson. That's Rick Spielman. This is episode 212. What? And Rick, before we get going, how many days until the 2025 NFL Draft?
You know what? We can celebrate the century. There are only 100 days left, Ryan Wilson, to the 2025 NFL Draft. Hey.
That's the energy I love to see. This is Rick at New Year's, by the way. This is how excited he gets. It's 9:30 p.m. He goes straight to bed. He'll see you next year. All right, Rick.
9 a.m.
Before we get to our QB rankings.
Not 9 p.m., buddy. Not 9:30. 9 p.m. That's Sanibel midnight.
Oh, I thought you stretched it out on December 31st. My bad.
No.
You don't get that hair by going to bed at 9:30. You get it by going at 9 p.m. Fair enough. All right, look, before we get to our QB rankings for the 2025 NFL Draft, want to get some draft-related news headlines real quick. We'll call them a modified version of overreactions. We get some questions for you. You don't know what they are. You're going to answer them in real time. First up, what would you advise Texas quarterback Quinn Ewers to do with this NFL draft decision? Because he was once at Ohio State, went to Texas. I think it's fair to assume that Arch Manning is ready to go as the next Texas quarterback. And I don't think that Quinn Ewers' season ended quite the way he wanted to. So what are you doing, Rick? What are you advising this young man?
I'm advising him to go to another school and get another year under his belt. And the reason I say that, he has not stayed healthy for an entire college season. I think he can still work on his craft. The one thing I do know is that this year, you did not see him push the ball down the field. He was great quarterbacking. The one thing I do like about him is that his resilience is very good. It means that he got benched in that Georgia game, came back in the second half, threw 2 touchdowns. So there is some resilience factor to this kid. The arm talent I didn't see extended down the field. If he has an opportunity, what's being reported out there, that he can make $6 million in an NIL deal, he's going to make a lot more money going back to college than he would if he came out in this year's draft.
Yeah, let me ask you this. Last week, you were doing your side job with the New York Jets. You're helping them find a new GM and a new head coach. So I asked this question to Mike Renner, who filled in. Will Howard or Quinn Ewers, who would get drafted first in this draft class in your mind?
I think it's going to be Quinn Ewers, but I am starting to wave that Will Howard flag. I think he is creeping up a little bit just on the way he's performed through these college playoffs. The one thing that I'll say, these players that are playing in these college playoffs have an advantage because those guys that didn't make it or played in a bowl game, they're actually sitting there on a couch eating potato chips watching these other guys play. Hopefully they're working out. I'm just saying they may be sitting on a couch eating potato chips, probably like you do when you watch college football on Saturday to get prepared for these With the First Pick podcasts. But all these players that are playing very well right now, that's the last image that an NFL evaluator has, because I looked at some of the tapes on some of these playoff games and I'm like, wow, this guy is really taking the next step. So it used to be going to these all-star games or performing in the pre-draft process. But I truly think with this format and getting to see a Scadaboo and what he did for Arizona State, and even though they lost, carrying that team on his back, that's really helping some of these kids draft stock.
Yeah, fun fact, Rick's name growing up, his nickname was Scadaboo. So you can call him that. He'll answer to Scadaboo. Scadaboo Spielman. Hey, you know why? By the way, it's funny you mentioned that because my last impression of C.J. Stroud was one that was brought back to my mind with his playoff win. Remember that Georgia game where no one knew that he could do those things athletically? And he did that last week.
He can move. He's not going to be a statue in the pocket. And he showed that in that Georgia game. And then you see what he's doing in the NFL. And you saw what he did last week in the playoff game. So, yes, this is a critical time for these players. And it's a huge advantage for these guys that have advanced through the playoffs.
All right, let's get to a feels like only in Dallas type of question. So Mike McCarthy was asked to be interviewed by the Bears last week. Jerry Jones said no. You assume that maybe Jerry Jones would bring back Mike McCarthy. Answer to that is also no. Deion Sanders, who played for Jerry Jones back in the day, Hall of Famer, one of the best, maybe the best cornerback ever in NFL history. currently the coach of the Colorado Buffaloes, said in December he likes coaching in Colorado. He talked to Jerry about the job. What does that do for you in terms of not only Shedeur Sanders, his son's NFL future, but Primetime's future?
Prime time in Jerry World? Would that be made for TV shows?
Is there enough room for those two egos?
Yeah. I'm anxious to see because his Shedeur Sanders, and we're going to talk about him down the show here, but he's a very talented quarterback. Can Deion win without his son? I know he'll have instant credibility when he walks into an NFL locker room, but that credibility will only go so far. What will he do to put these guys in the best position to win? Because when you watch Colorado, they struggled up front on the offensive line. He saw his son literally take a beating week in and week out because of the pass protection. Is their defense? What's his defensive game plan? The other thing that college coaches really struggle with is you don't get an opportunity to sign 5 stars because you got one, hopefully 5-star in the first round, and you got about a 50% chance of hitting that player. So the hardest thing for college coaches is understanding the cap, understanding roster management. Hey, you only have 46 dudes out there on game day. It's not like you have 120 soldiers out there. So those are the things that at least I've seen, and we've interviewed some college coaches where they're going to struggle, how to develop the draft board. What do you do in free agency? How do you manipulate the roster all through the year? So those are the things that I think he would have to learn. Would he bring energy? Would he bring excitement? I have no question about that. But when it gets down to the nitty gritty and you really get your fingers dirty and get it into the mud and how this actually operates, I don't know that answer to that question.
Yeah, he had, and you know this better than I do. He's done a good job of surrounding himself with good coaches. You work with Pat Shermer, who's his OC, and they had what felt like a really good season. So he has that part down. The other point reminded me of Dan Campbell and the success he's had in Detroit, but that's also because they hired Brad Holmes, the general manager. Some guy named Chris Spielman had a lot to do with that. And I say that because in Dallas, we know who the general manager is, and I don't know if he has the details as down as a Brad Holmes, for example, but that's a conversation for another time. Anyway, fun story to follow, and we will be following it for the next 100 days, maybe longer. All right, Rick, we're going to take a quick break when we come back. Let's take a sneak peek at our QB rankings. Me and you, individual, right after this. Welcome back to With the First Pick here on CBS Sports Network. That's Rick Spielman. I'm Ron Wilson. So, Rick, we're going to take a look at our individual quarterback rankings ahead of these All-Star games. But I want you to hop in the With the First Pick time machine with me back to week 4, back in the fall. These were our first rankings of where we had these quarterbacks had we fast forwarded all the way to the draft. So back in mid-September here, week 4 of the college football season. And the funny thing is, 3 of these guys, by my count, have returned to school. A 4th May in Quinn Ewers. I had Shedeur Sanders number 1. I had Cam Ward number 3. You had Cam Ward number 4. And a lot has changed from September until early 2025. And that just goes to show you, you got to take the totality of the season. You can't just go on 1 or 2 games. Any thoughts on this? Does this bring you back?
Oh, have the mighty have fallen, as we'd like to say, because that's coming out off of their junior tape or their previous season tape. So that's why you need, as you said, the totality, which is a great word. I'll look that up after the show. But the entire picture, and the entire picture is not done yet. You still have these all-star games. You still have a national championship game. You still have the pre-draft process. So even where we're at today, when we flash the unveiling of the new rankings, those are going to change here between now and the time draft day shows up. And that, you know what, thing. Ryan Wilson? What? That is 100 days from now, just if you didn't know.
Well done. Well done. Reading comprehension still very good with Mr. Spielman there. It is wild, though, to look at those rankings and think where we were then. And also, one of the things, and you know about this better than I do, I'll ask you this quickly before we get to the picks. One of the things is that you fall in love with a kid. I think you probably held on to Carson Beck a little longer than I did, and you've seen the glimpses of what makes them good, so you're not willing to come off that. Is that fair to say?
I would say that wait for the pitcher, because Carson Beck had a lot of good things. He had the crappy game against Texas, but then he rallied and started playing really well towards the end of the season. Then he tore his elbow up, in a SEC championship game. So I think the best thing that he did was go back. He's going to be down at the University of Miami. They seem to have a little fund for quarterbacks down there. Cam Ward last year, now Carson Beck this year. Cam Ward really helped his stock. I think Carson Beck's going to do the same thing. And I will bet you now, Ryan Wilson, that he will be on top of our board next year at this time.
All right, the dollar bet. We'll mark it down. All right, let's before we go 12 months ahead, let's look at this is the with the first pick consensus rankings. So producer Debo took my top 7 and your top 7, mushed them together, and here's what it looks like. No surprise. Number 1, Cam Ward. So we all came around on Cam Ward because he had a fantastic season. Number 2, Shedeur Sanders. And we'll talk Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart, and Quinn Ewers in a bit. But let's start with Cam Ward. And the concerns we had with him coming into the season, Rick, was that he played a lot of hero ball, didn't play on time. I thought he got better as the season went on. You agree with that?
I do.
Okay.
I think he's patient and poised. I think he does. He has the ability. And just talking to all of these GM candidates, it's interesting to see how they evaluate quarterbacks from across the league. And I've got some pretty good inside information, being privileged enough to sit in 22,000 GM candidates that we've had through with the New York Jets. But the thing that has changed is the mobility piece has really become important for these teams as they're sitting there and looking at quarterbacks. And there's no question, in my opinion, besides Milroe, who we'll talk about in a minute, Cam Ward has the best mobility to get outside and make off-schedule plays. Now, the issue is he had the crappy Cal game through the pick 6, but he came back and rallied them and ended up winning that game. The Georgia Tech game was just horrendous. Had to fumble at the end of the game. So there's still some inconsistencies. You watch some wow plays, and then you got a head scratcher on why would he do that or why would he throw it there? And I'm not going to get into it because we don't have enough time, because it should be another hour show on why do you quit on your team halfway through a game. And I'm stopping right there. But it's just a tragedy. It's a catastrophe. It is horrible. Until I get the answer, it is a really no-no on quitting on your team during the middle of a game, regardless of what the situation was. There.
And you will get the answer at the combine, if not sooner. That I can guarantee you. Very few guarantees in life. That question will be asked by Rick Spielman once he comes face to the Cam Ward. All that said, draft range, I'm going to give you a range. You tell me if that sounds all right. 1 through 2.5.
I think he's going to go in one of the top 2 picks. Not that he deserves it, because I do think there are better players at their position than he is as a quarterback. But the premium on the position, I'm not saying he's going to get overdrafted, but, who needs a quarterback in the top 2? Both of them do.
Both of them do, right. All right, here's a tough one. I struggle with this one. I'll let you go first so you won't get angry, because you get angry at my comps. What's your comp for Cam Ward?
I'm not going to go off my comps, what I said earlier. I think he is a better version of a Tyrod Taylor. That's where I'm going to lay in my comp right now. Okay.
Well, I'm going to spice it up a little bit. This was tough for me, but a little better athlete, similar arm strength. I think if this player were coming out today, he'd be a little more athletic than he was at the time. Jay Cutler.
Why do we do this? We're not going to be invited back on HQ if you keep coming up with these insane comps.
You wanted to say idiotic, so thank you for saying insane for television. Okay, fair enough. Team fit, I think it's clear that any team at the top, Will Levis the experiment's probably over if Brian Callahan's coming back, and it looks like he is.
Mr. Robotic, I'll throw it 90 miles an hour through the wall and the receiver, and Ryan Wilson standing on a sideline during pro day.
Yeah, hitting me. That's not even an exaggeration. All right, let's go to number 2 on our list.
Yeah, wait, it took you about 2 months to recover from that ball you took in the side of your noggin.
Yeah, well, I don't know if let's be honest, we're not sure if I'm recovered yet or not. The jury's still out on that. I'm trying.
You know what I think you should do? You know what I think you should do? I think you should wear a Guardian cap next time we go out to pro days.
Set an example for the kids. That's a great idea.
Yeah. a CBS Guardian cap. You see it all the time.
You know what? That's a pretty good idea, Rick. And I'm going to put some hair on it. Win-win. Good call, Mr. Spielman. All right, next up. Enough with this tomfoolery. Number 2 on our list, perhaps the number 2 overall pick. We'll see. Shedeur Sanders. And I'm going to follow up on your point about Cam Ward when you had talked to the GM candidates. The reason Shedeur is number 2 for me and maybe for you, I think when it's all said and done, he gets measured, he's going to be a little shorter than Cam, not the athlete, not the arm strength. Because if they were equal physically, this would be a much closer race. You agree with that?
I agree, and I think Shedeur is a better natural passer than Cam. I think his accuracy, I think the way the ball comes out of his hands, I think he can throw receivers open. He can fit the ball in some tight windows. His biggest issue is he holds the ball too long in the pocket. You're not going to be able to do that. I know he's got sacked 22 million times since he's been at Colorado, but some of those are on him as well. Take the check down, play in rhythm. My biggest concern with him, can he play in rhythm in an NFL offense?
Fair enough. And, we said that Caleb would be able to figure it out, and it took Caleb 3 months to figure it out in Chicago. So it's not something you can necessarily coach out of your system in 2 weeks of training camp. So that's something to consider as he gets to the next level. Not the athlete of Caleb with the arm strength either, probably. Does he get outside of the top 5?
I don't think so. I think there's too many needy teams at quarterback, and these two, Cam and Mr. Sanders there, are the only 2 that are worthy of a first-round pick. And everybody will do their homework, but teams, the Giants, if he slipped past Tennessee and Cleveland, there's too many teams in that top 10 that need a quarterback, and these are the 2 most viable options this year for number 1 picks.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree, even though, as you mentioned, these guys probably QB4 or QB5 in last year's draft class. They are QBs 1 and 2 right now, and that's how they're going to be drafted. All right, Rick, 1 and 2 in the books. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, going to hit the rest of our top 5 quarterbacks as we head into the All-Star games right after this. Welcome back to With the First Pick here on CBS Sports Network. That's Rick Spielman. I'm Ryan Wilson. Rick, Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders are a number 1 and number 2 on the With the First Pick aggregate QB rankings ahead of these college all-star games. Let's go to number 3, and this guy is incredibly intriguing. You know him. You've spoken with him for several years now. Jalen Milroe has announced that he's coming out of Alabama. He hasn't made quite the progress I was hoping for in that Kalen DeBoer system, like we saw with Michael Penix Jr., who had 2 years with Kalen in Washington. He feels like a day 2 pick for me, solely on upside. But you tell me, is there a team that's going to be desperate enough to take him in the first round? Because he can't play. He cannot play day 1, correct?
Well, I would say he can't. But if a team drafts this player, he's got tremendous arm talent. He's got maybe the best. I know for sure the best out of this year, and one of the best I've seen with the ball in his hands when he becomes a runner. We've seen it with Anthony Richardson. You've seen it with Lamar Jackson. You're starting to hear some comparisons of Lamar Jackson out there, but he cannot process in a pocket fast enough. He's a better deep ball thrower than he is short and intermediate, but this kid has a lot of natural talent. If I were a team and I drafted this player, I would have to readjust my whole offensive scheme to fit his skill set. Because if he's going to sit in a pocket and try to get through progressions and go from 1 to 2 to 3, he's going to fail. So I don't know, even if you're talking about Justin Fields, who has a talented arm, a great athlete, but he cannot function when he has to go through his progressions.
Right, which makes it so the athleticism is so incredibly intriguing, but all the other stuff is what concerns you, because Anthony Richardson went top 5. And he had some success. He struggled with injuries, but also there have been some times where you were like, okay, this guy needs to play more football. I'm assuming on the Spielman-o-meter, you would prefer Jalen to come back to get more reps, or are you okay with him coming out?
I don't know if that system fits him. That's what I'm saying is he has to get in a system that fits what his skill set is. And you have to understand where his limitations are. Now, Chicago took a swing on Justin Fields, and he's bounced around. Lamar Jackson's an exception to the rule because Baltimore traded up at the bottom of the first to get him. And he's become an MVP candidate every year he plays on the field because of what they. The one thing that I will say is that when I watch Lamar play live and I watch this kid play live, I think Lamar Jackson's a better thrower than Jalen Milroe.
So, Greg Roman, stay by the phone because you will be getting a call by the team that drafts Jalen Milroe. All right, next up on our list, Jackson Dart. And I think I liked him in the fall a little bit better than you did. My concerns with Jackson Dart is not the toughness. He's one of the toughest kids on planet Earth, probably not named Shedeur Sanders. The accuracy at times concern me, and then the lack of arm strength down the field concern me a little bit. I think he's better than Matt Corral coming out of Ole Miss. Matt Corral's a third-round pick, so that feels like the range for me. What do you think about Jackson Dart?
I agree with you on that. I think he has to get his body behind his throws, especially on the deep shots. I do think he's accurate. I think he has more than enough arm talent to play at the NFL level. My biggest concern, just like we talked about Hendon Hooker when he came out of Tennessee, I think Lane Kiffin does a phenomenal job getting receivers open. So you don't have to see him. You don't see him throwing a lot of tight windows. And how can he adjust to an NFL offense? Because he's not the unique athlete that we were just talking about with Milroe. He's going to be an NFL quarterback, but it's going to take him some time. I think more product of coming out of an Ole Miss offense.
Day 2, you okay with that, or is that a little rich for you?
I think he'll be third round. I think he'll be in that and has an opportunity to go. And I don't see him as a second round pick. I can see him potentially going in third. But, you know, when your guy, Spencer Rattler, the king of all kings that have come out, slid all the way to the fourth, and how disappointed you were that day when we were covering the draft, or fifth, whatever it was. I stopped counting after Saturday. Let's just give him credit and say Saturday.
Saturday it is.
I could see some of these guys maybe falling farther down the line than what they anticipate.
This is why you're professional, Rick. That's a fantastic segue to our next guy, Quinn Ewers, who had first-round buzz for a couple years now, and here he is on our list at number 5. What are we making of Quinn Ewers? You talked about him coming back, but I asked you earlier, Will Howard to Quinn Ewers. Will Howard feels like a late day 2, day 3 guy, so that's the range that we're talking about with Quinn Ewers. Is he? I'll ask you this: is he a starter in the NFL at any point in your mind?
Go back to school. I'm tired of talking about Ewers. We're going to go on to Will Howard because I want to plant my flag on Will Howard.
Okay.
So I just want to hit Will Howard while we have a few minutes here. After he had a horrible Michigan game, look at how he's played through the playoffs. He's big. He's physical. He can be a dual threat quarterback. Now, he throws the guys that are wide open all the time. I think Chip Kelly does a great job scheming those guys open. He's throwing to NFL caliber receivers, all top end receivers. But his leadership and just sitting down, and I got an opportunity to talk with this kid for about an hour. He just has something, that it factor or whatever that is, that are going to overcome some of his shortcomings as a quarterback.
And physically, he looks to be built like a tank on television. Is he built like a tank in person?
He is a big individual. Yes, he is thick through his lower, but he's not one of those guys that are robotic with his upper body. He has some flexibility when he throws the ball. He's not Will Levis that looked like a bodybuilder coming out. He looks like he has some flexibility in the way he throws the ball, but really thick through the lower.
It is with some irony that you give Will Levis a hard time for doing a bunch of push-ups and bench presses. Easy there, Spielman. That's your bread and butter back. He's doing.
I do not have to play quarterback in the NFL, so I'm good.
That's right. You can be a meathead on your own time. You're not playing quarterback. Fair enough. You got me there. And Will Howard, in his defense, has played better as the season's progressed, and that's exactly what you want to see. And he is getting some buzz. A young man that's gotten a ton of buzz all fall. He is my Spencer Rattler for this year, tied for 6th on our list with Will Howard. You know him, you love him. Former Ohio State quarterback. Just finished at Syracuse. Kyle McCord. Not the athlete physically, the physical specimen of a Will Howard, but he was spinning it this year. Now, he had some wild games. The Pitt game, he threw 5 interceptions, but he outplayed, or at least played up to the level of Cam Ward in that finale in Syracuse at the end of the season that cost Miami a trip to the ACC championship game. What are your thoughts on Kyle McCord? Because you know him as well, and I think he's a different player than he was in 2023 for Ohio State.
I think he's playing with more confidence since he's been at Syracuse. I think he makes better decisions, although I scratched my head after watching the Pitt game. Don't know why he had thrown 5 interceptions that game. They must have had the colorblind glasses on where he didn't figure out what color jersey that the Syracuse Orangemen were wearing that day. But I think he's really improved his draft stock. I thought he was a college free agent last year. So that going to Syracuse, playing with more confidence, playing with that assertiveness, I think has really helped him. So I like him. I still think, now let me ask you this, Ryan Wilson, general manager. Let's say you're a college team, and let's say you're the general manager at Ohio State, since all these colleges have general managers now. You saw McCord, you saw Will Howard. Which one are you going with to lead the Buckeyes?
I'm sticking with Will Howard because he plays with the confidence that you want. And to your point, Kyle McCord looked overwhelmed at times in Columbus last year. Completely different for Syracuse, where he was the big fish in the smaller pond, I'll say. That said, I got them ranked pretty closely in terms of their NFL draft rankings. So I'll leave that for a conversation for later. But I like both these guys. I'm Kyle guy. You're a Will Howard guy. We'll be okay. All right, guess what? Before you ask me another question that I can't answer, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some of these guys that we love to death but decided to go back to college, and we'll rank them and their prospects right after this. Welcome back to With the First Pick. All right, Rick, we've unveiled our quarterback rankings for the 2025 class in pencil, or in oatmeal, as you like to say. Let's take a look back at the guys that we had high hopes for, but they decided to come back to school, and I think we would agree that every one of them made the right decision. This is my list because you were busy saving the Jets to put the list together, but I'm sure you'll agree with every single one of these, so I'm happy to get your thoughts. Number 1, Nuss Bus, Garrett Nussmeier. You and I were really high on him over the summer, had a great start to the season, and then he got a little Mac Jones in him towards the end of the season, gave us cause for concern. He's going back to school at LSU, so I'm looking forward to that. Carson Beck, we've talked a little bit about. Producer Stryker is a Penn State alum, as is producer Debo, and apparently everyone else that works behind the scenes at CBS Sports. Not happy about Drew Aller being number 3. They think that perhaps he should be at least number 2. You can talk about that. Clemson's Cade Klubnik at number 4. A lot of listeners and viewers reached out about Cade because he played so well, and we didn't talk a lot about him, but that's because I thought he was coming back, and he did. And then, of course, Miller Moss, red-hot start to the season, ended up getting benched, and now he has since transferred to Louisville. Give me your thoughts on this list top to bottom, and I'll cut you off when I need to ask you a question.
Yeah, first, before I start going through this list, Brian Wilson, that was one of the questions I was going to ask you, if you could be a candidate for potential GM opportunities in that New York Jets front office. But when you flip-flop like a dead fish, when I put you on the spot, it eliminated you right away. So I think
fair enough.
Yeah. Wah, 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 wah. Okay. Here, I am going to disagree with your list just because I'd like to disagree with you.
Yeah. What do you got?
Nuss Bus, I would say, is probably the best processor, but too many mistakes this year, too many turnovers. I think another year of him playing at the collegiate level and gaining that experience, I think you're going to see him shoot up. We saw flashes of that early in the season, but the more competition and the tougher competition he had to play against, that came quite evident that he wasn't ready to come in the NFL. Beck, we've talked about. I think he'll be the number 1 guy next year before it's said and done, if he could come back from that elbow injury.
Hey, let me ask you this quickly. Here's my interrupting question. And I said this maybe on HQ earlier. If Carson Beck's seasons had been switched, if the 2024 season was the year before and then he played like 2023 this past fall, he's a top 10 pick. You agree with that?
I do.
Okay.
For whatever reason. But when you watch him, there was a lot of drop balls now. Like the decision making, I don't like the decision for whatever reason, but I don't think he had the same talent around him as he had the year before. So it kind of
Right.
tells you that this guy, in order to excel, is going to need some receivers, a Brock Bowers type tight end, better offensive line play. He did not carry this team with a lack of talent they had at the skill positions like we saw last year when Georgia had a lot of skilled come out as well. But I also know, some teams may be concerned about this elbow or ulnar, whatever injury that he has there. I think it's very similar to what Brock Purdy had. And so now you have a little bit of history of it hasn't affected Brock Purdy. So that may not be as big as concern as you might have had if no one else had that injury. But this is for producer Stryker, for producer Debo. My biggest climber, and I think is going to go to a whole nother level, is Mr. Aller from Penn State.
Oh, okay. Tell us.
I really love the way he's built. I love the arm talent. He was Mr. Robotic, Frankenstein, whatever you want to call him, playing by the numbers all the way through till the end of the season and in the playoffs. And all of a sudden, you start seeing him play football and not try to play by the numbers and make plays that were off schedule. And to show that for his size, he has unique athletic talent. Shows that he can make the deep ball throws down the field. So I think this kid is, out of all the guys we talked about, this will be the kid that maybe, and I'm saying this, and I'm predicting, may be the biggest climber and maybe the number 1 overall pick next year because he came back.
Stryker got to you. Hey, let me ask you this. If Drew Aller,
I didn't want to get fired off the show, so I had to say that. Stryker sent me, in fact, on my phone, Stryker and Debo gave me the exact script to say when I was talking about Drew Aller.
Well, that's good. You read it right. You got the names right. You pronounce everyone's name properly, so you're making progress. So sort of following up on that, Drew Aller, even Carson Beck comparison, you said this about Carson. He didn't have the guys to throw to in 24 that he did in 23. If Drew Aller had the Ohio State wide receivers and that Ohio State offensive line, when healthy at least, that Ohio State defense, although Penn State's defense is pretty good, it may have looked a little different. You agree with that?
Yeah, and the Ohio State running backs, although Penn State has 2 pretty good running backs. And I believe, is it Singleton that's coming back for Penn State, the runner?
He and Allen both are coming back, yep.
Yeah, so I think that everything's set up for this kid to have great success. And putting him with the Ohio State offense, because I don't think Penn State has very good receivers, to be honest with you. He had a unicorn at tight end this year.
Yep.
So that is going to have to be replaced. But hopefully they can get him some better weapons. I don't know if anyone can replicate what Ohio State produces at the receiver position. It's a phenomenal on what they produce year in and year out. Go Garrett Wilson.
What about JSN, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Marvin Harrison Jr., the guy you love more than your family at times, it felt like. What about this, though? We talked a little bit about Cade Klubnik during the season, and we sort of put him on the back burner because we weren't sure what he's going to do. He made some strides as well. Is there an opportunity for him to move up?
Yeah, I do believe so, because he got improved through the year. Like, you watched him a year ago, it was like, this guy is a late round free agent guy. I don't know how big he is, but I think he has grown as a quarterback and he continues to get better. And as long as they're continuing to ascend, and I think this kid's on that path, I think he's going to work himself into this mix in next year's class as well.
And then finally we had Miller Moss, who sort of came out of nowhere in week 1 in that LSU game against Nussmeyer. And then with a month to go in the season, he found his way to the bench, transferred to Louisville. We don't know how big he is either, but he processes pretty well. And there's an opportunity for him to get drafted, I would imagine, if he puts it together at Louisville.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when we were talking about him in the beginning of the year, it was like, who in the heck is this kid? Right. And him getting through his progressions, more than enough arm talent, although it's not the strongest arm in the world. But I think going to Louisville and getting with Coach Braum, I think is going to be a huge benefactor for him. So I'm anxious to see how he progresses as well.
Yeah, and I'll just mention this on the way out before we go to break here. Connor Wigman started off as a first-round prospect at Texas A&M, found his way to the bench, has since transferred to Houston. So if he can find his form, he'll be a guy we're going to be talking a lot about 12 months from now as well. But for now, I'm going to take a quick break, Rick. When we come back, we're going to get to some mailbag questions you haven't seen. Get your thoughts on these in real time right after this. All right, Rick, we're reaching into the old with the first big mailbag. First question up from June on YouTube. With the Vikings losing, what's the better situation for the franchise? Stick with Sam Darnold or go with 2024 first-round pick J.J. McCarthy? Because Sam Darnold looked like Sam Darnold of old the last 2 weeks, but he had a lot of good as well. What are you doing?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a very difficult decision because Sam Darnold has earned a contract, and I understand how poorly he's played over the last 2 weeks. You know, everything on the issue was, for me, is there was everything on the line going to be the number 1 overall seed to the 5th seed in the when they lost to the Lions. And the Lions are still playing with guys like you and Stryker and Debo and everybody else on the defensive side. And then, you know, and it was that was an inspired team. I understand that. I've been in situations where, you know, the LA Rams and dealing and prayers out to all those families dealing with those forest fires and, you know, the loss of life and properties and everything is just devastating to watch on TV. Yet Sean McVay got that team focused and ready to go. And I think that, you know, was an inspiration, I think, to those players because we are in the entertainment business. And to see the LA Rams or to watch football when there's so much devastation going out in the LA area, I think is a relief. And I think the players, you know, did a phenomenal job not worrying about their families. And I know the organization and what Bill Bidwell did, you know, to bring the families out and everything. So there was no distraction. And they went out there and played lights out last night. Yep. So to get back to your question is that you got to remember J.J. McCarthy was on IR last year, so he missed all that practice time. When you're on IR, you cannot practice. You can sit in meetings, you can do this, but developing a quarterback, and you look at Green Bay, how they developed Rodgers, him sitting, how Mahomes sat behind Alex Smith, you know, how Love sat behind Rodgers, but those guys were practicing, right, you know, through the season and going through cards and doing everything they had to do. So he wasn't doing any of that. So he's coming in like a true rookie. And so, you know, they're going to have a lot of tough decisions to make. They have a lot of cap space, but they also have a lot of other players that are going to become unrestricted free agents as well. So I'm anxious to see what they do up there in Minnesota, because if they don't do anything, now they may franchise them. They, you know, I think they have enough cap space, and I don't know, you know, how they're going to manipulate their cap, but they could potentially franchise him, keep him for one more year. He doesn't have an option then except hold out and let let JJ develop for another year. But I would look at, can I franchise him and keep him for a year? Would you give him a Baker Mayfield 3-year, $100 million type deal? If they don't, I think he will get that on the open market.
Yep. And I feel like Minnesota's probably best case scenario for his future as well, but we'll find out. All right, next up, Cole Windemuth on YouTube asks, I love this question. Should the Titans stay with Will Levis and tank again for a better quarterback class in 2026? What are you doing, GM Rick?
Yeah, you can't tank now. That's just, I apologize, but I don't, that question gets my dander up a little bit. You're going to go into this whole off season. You're going to have a new general manager coming in place. You got a coach that's going into a second year that better show some progress, or else he's going to be out of a job eventually. So no, do not tank, because you don't know what the quarterback class, we just talked about it, but what if a guy loses his leg out there, or someone has a devastating injury? You don't know what this quarterback class, hell, we thought Beck was the franchise quarterback of the world going into it. And then now he's coming back and went to the transfer portal to Miami. So no, go out and get, if you really believe in one of these guys, go out and get that quarterback. Now, if the new general manager comes in place and they say, I don't want to touch either one of these guys, I understand that. But you better look at options in free agency then, because I don't know if Will Levis is the answer.
Okay, so the Titans aren't going to tank. Beyond that, we don't know what the QB answer is going to be for 2025 in Tennessee. Fair enough. Okay, next question.
I can imagine going into the owner. Hey, just so you know, I know we're having our season end meetings, but we're going to tank one more year, just in case you were wondering. Okay.
You don't say that at the end. You don't say that at the end of the year meeting. You say it after you get your contract signed. Come on, Rick. That's GM 101. All right, next up from Cody on YouTube. Can Shedeur Sanders perform without his father? Been his coach at Jackson State, been his coach at Colorado, probably his coach all growing up. I would guess yes, but what do you think?
That's a great question. That's one of the most intelligent. I don't know, because he's been coached by his dad, and at Jackson State, at Colorado. All of a sudden, he's going up into the big boy world, and he's going to have new coaches. Unless Deion tries to manipulate the whole draft, ends up being in Dallas, trading Dak Prescott, and then, bringing in his son, which is absolutely ridiculous because you can't do that. So I'm anxious to see him from a maturity standpoint. Now, I think he has that it factor. He's fun to watch because no matter what happens, he seems to have that it factor to him. But can he function in an offense? And can he, though, you know what I'm going to ask you?
Yeah.
Let's say he's working with a new coach, new quarterback coach, new offensive coordinator. And Prime is watching this while he's at Colorado. And Prime is telling him what he thinks he should do. Was that become a conflict? That's even a better question.
No, that is important. And you've seen this probably with less famous family members getting involved with players that you were in charge of. I mean, that sometimes you have to have tough conversations, and you've talked about that before. But you would like to have one voice in his ear, and hopefully it's the coach on the coaching staff. And, when you go home for Thanksgiving and stuff and Christmas, you guys can talk about work. But after that, just stay there. All right, look, got to do this quickly because we've got a little time left. We're up against it. But give me, don't Rick a Buster on this one. This is from our buddy in Scotland, Nikki. Excited to have draft season back. Can you make a bold prediction for this year's surprise pick like Atlanta in 2024, Rick?
Ooh, that's a great question. I haven't really thought about it.
I got one. You want to hear it?
Yes.
Let's say that Shedeur Sanders slips to like 9 or 10. Somehow he gets by, whatever. The pre-draft process doesn't go as well as it should for him. I want to see the Pittsburgh Steelers traded from 21 to go get Shedeur Sanders at 9 or 10. What do you think of that?
Boy. Yeah, that's bold. That's dumb, but it's bold.
It's not bold. It's not dumber than the Falcons taking Michael Penix Jr.
Okay, I'll do one bold prediction.
All right.
Our tight end from Penn State, since I have to wave the Penn State flag.
All right.
The tight end from Penn State goes in the top 10.
That is bold prediction.
He gets drafted higher than Brock Bowers.
Brock Bowers went 13th to the Las Vegas Raiders. Tyler Warren, out of Richmond, Virginia, goes higher than Brock Bowers. That is a dollar bet waiting to get lost right there. That's what that is. All right. I think it's more likely that the Steelers trade up for Shedeur Sanders than it is that Tyler Warren goes in the top 10. But I could be wrong. I've been wrong once or twice before, as you can attest.
Tell me, have you been right? When have you been right? And why would Pittsburgh do you think he gives them a better chance to win next year than signing back a Russell Wilson?
That'll be a conversation we have to figure out on another podcast because we gotta hit the bricks here.
Why do you keep avoiding? You flip like a fish.
Listen, Rick, you can listen to With the First Pick. Scan the old QR code. And don't forget, this Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Match that we all waiting for. Ravens-Bills. Don't miss it.